All right, we're back, and it's COMP397, Week 8, Lesson 8, Part 1. And what we're going to be talking about today is more about our side scroller project that we're going to be doing. This is the next one that you guys are going to be assigned. Again, we talked about it last week, kind of just after the a little bit of that midterm exam, and we should probably review it again this week. So let's talk about that just a little bit. I showed you a kind of a build last week when we got together, and I want to kind of talk about, the project in more detail. Again, Friday, July 10th, so class 9, which would be after the break. Right now we're sitting at week 8, right? So you have this week, and then the week we get back, after we get back, and by Friday, right? That's when it's due. I'm guaranteeing most people haven't started because I know that your patterns are just like you start whenever you feel like, right? But at the end of the day, this needs to get done because I don't have a lot of room to move this around to give extensions and stuff on this one. Only because the final project, which is going to take the remainder of the semester, it's worth a lot of marks, and you can do it with somebody else, but you need to get this one done in order for you to understand how to move through this one into the next one. So that being said, again, you have your 3 things that I'm really looking for in this one. You've got your start screen, your main game screen, and your game end screen with an instructions for the user. Now again, I said instructions for the user. I'd like it to be another screen, but I'm not making it a mandatory thing. If you add it in, then as another screen, I'll give you a bonus, which is not that difficult to do. We'll talk about how to do that over the course of today, I hope, to get through that. So those 3 screens are almost like 3 states, like we talked about before. So we're going to talk about a state machine, how to switch between screens. That's important for us to do as well. Player control of an avatar, which I showed you. In my case, I was going to go to the example from last week. I'm just going to restart this thing. It's just the example we built last week. It's just a plane, right? So right now we're at the point where I've got a plane going on, and if you follow my examples from last week, and if you're on GitHub, then all you have is this plane and a couple of clouds that are moving down. This would be your play screen or your play state, if you will, right? On the top here, you're seeing that I'm getting a pretty good frame rate, so I'm doing all right, even in a simulator, right? And again, I don't have any collisions right now, but I do have the ability for me to fly underneath sprites. Remember, we talked about sprites. Right now, they're just bitmaps. We're going to convert them today, right? And your plane, as it flies through everything, we have to talk about the main mechanic would be collisions. So when you're playing, or when your one sprite or bitmap collides with another one, or intersects with another one, we call that a collision when they connect, right? When there's a collision, then you can do things like get points or lose lives or whatever you're going to do, right? That's how it works. So again, just very basic. That's what we're talking about when I say my gameplay screen. That's what I'm saying. That's the gameplay screen. Start screen we haven't done yet, and game end screen we haven't done yet. In fact, we haven't done screens at all, just the main one. Enemies, in my case, are it's the actual the clouds, right? Now remember, you're making your own, so you're not going to use clouds or islands or my plane, right? You're going to use your own assets, and in fact, your stuff. Let me just run this one more time. Your stuff isn't going to come from top down like this. Your stuff is going to go right to left, like different direction, because you're going to do a side scroller. This is an example of a top scroller. Okay, random placement of items to collect and or obstacles to pass through or over. Example, a male pilot, we use the island. A scoring system, which we'll talk about today. And the player must have a life counter or health status, this kind of thing. And add sound effects for collisions with enemies and collecting points. You still have your internal documentation and your external documentation, which includes a company logo, table of contents, version history, and so on. And you've done these before now. It's not like it's new to you. You've done it for a couple of assignments, right? So you know what I'm looking for. in terms of your document. Of course, connection to GitHub. So again, just wanted to go over that quickly with you, just to remind you of what we're really talking about today, right? Next week, or when the week we get back, when the week your assignment's due, I may introduce to you the final, even though typically I give it to you week 10. I'll probably introduce you and give it to you week 9, so you have a little bit more time, an extra week for you to have the criteria in your hands so you can partner with somebody to get it done for the final. Remember, the final also includes a presentation, and there's a couple options for it. One, you can present in front of the class. Now, there's a lot of you, right? And the other option is to screencast your presentation, just like I'm doing. I'm creating a little movie, and you're presenting your final product, and you can put it on YouTube or wherever you like, and then send me the link, and I can view it that way as well. So I'm going to give you both options, because sometimes we don't have enough time to pick everybody in the class to do their presentation. So I give you an option to do either a presentation or I recommend a screencast. You probably should record yourself. And we'll talk about how to do that later on as we go. Okay, so last week when we ended off, I'm just going to go back to where we stopped. This is our main our game .ts file, and if you notice, I'm still using this plane, island, and cloud idea, and they're all individual assets, right? Now remember, I recommended that you buy Texture Packer because I think it's a great little thing, a little tool that you can use, Texture Packer. And again, what you want to do now is combine these things into a texture atlas. And once we've done that, we can use sprites instead of using bitmaps. And the reason for that is because we only have one file. If I add other things in there, it'll be a little bit easier than what we're doing now. The one thing we haven't finished, though, we haven't done the background, the ocean. We have our plane, our island, our cloud, but we don't have our ocean in the background. That's what makes gives us the effect of the plane that's flying, right? Your background. In your case, you might make some kind of other background, and we'll talk about where to get these things. That kind of goes from right to left, that you can get stuff. So I need some kind of ocean. Okay. Luckily, if I look at I'm just going to stop debugging here for a second, and if I look at my my files here, I notice that I do have an ocean GIF, right? And if I hover over it, or if I double click it, this is what it looks like. It's actually a much longer ocean than what you normally see. Our screen is only 1/3 of this one. So how does this work? How does the ocean thing work? Right? Because you want to be able to see the ocean scroll. Scroll means move, right? So it's like a big bitmap that's going to move. We're going to move it the same way we move the island and the cloud and everything else, right? But we've got some other rules. So first we have to talk about what this thing is. Okay, to understand how we scroll stuff, we should really probably go into something. I'm going to bring up fireworks for a second, just so we can use as a blackboard or a whiteboard for us. And I'm going to make a new whiteboard for us so we can use it. Okay, so well, here's our whiteboard, and imagine if we have a viewport, and I like to say viewport because that is the view that your player is going to be seeing. And the viewport is kind of rectangular, similar to what we see here, right? No, it's not red. Let's give it just a border, a red border. There we go. That's our viewport. So that's what the player sees. The player doesn't see anything outside of this square, right? You can have other things up here around your player because the computer will keep track, your program will keep track of other assets outside of this area, right? No problem, right? So if this is the size of one screen, what we want to do then, right, is we want to put this other background that scrolls underneath or outside of our screen, right? So how would we do that? So let me just draw a bigger rectangle here, right? So draw one bigger one. There's a bigger one, and I'll make it so it's really big. And I'll also change the color so we can see that it's let's say a blue because it's representing the ocean. And you know what? We'll even fill it in with a bit of lighter blue so we can see. Oh, that's an ugly color. Let's make it so it's lighter blue. There we go. Or not green. I chose the wrong one. Yeah. Anyways, that's fine. Let's put this also on a layer below it. So here's my view screen. If you can see the square, I'll make it so that the borders are heavier, so you can see. So this is what the player sees. The player only sees what's in the red border. But this is the ocean. So what's the ocean going to do, right? Well, if I draw a couple of squiggles, if I go back to this one and I make this, I'll just hide the rectangle for a second. And I want to add some squiggles to the ocean, some stuff, that's on it, so you can see what it looks like. So just to replicate what we're seeing here. So I'm going to take the pencil tool and I'm going to draw a couple of weird squiggles, right? So we know it's kind of the ocean that's kind of moving, right? And let's move it over here as well. Oops. I'll just Control A and combine everything, group everything together. There we go. All right, so let's draw a couple more squiggles here, just so you get what I'm saying. It's important to understand this because otherwise, I'm just drawing squiggles so you can see it move, not because it represents anything right now. Okay, so this is our ocean, let's say, right? And it's outside of our viewable area. Let's make our canvas a little bit bigger so you can see what I'm talking about. Canvas size, we'll make it like 800 by 800, really massive. So this is our canvas, right? And let's say this is our view screen, and we'll put our, this is what we can see. What happens is the ocean scrolls down, right? And it looks like, right, to our view screen, that it's actually coming down. Now it's going to hit a point where it gets to this point here, when it meets the top of our view screen. Once it hits the top of the view screen, what we want to do is do this, put it back up here. Right? It's a trick again. Video games, 99% of what we do in video games with computer graphics, they're all tricks or illusions, if you will, right? So what we want to do is always just keep repeating. So we're going to move this down until the top of the ocean meets the top of our view screen. And as soon as this happens and it hits here, we reset again. We keep doing that over and over again. So that's how the ocean is going to work. How would that work for you, though? You're going to do a side scroller, right? So think about how it's going to work for you. Well, your side scroller, your ocean, your background won't be like this, right? Your background might be something like, I'm just going to rotate it so we can see what I'm talking about here. I'll rotate it from this point. Your background might look something like this if it was an ocean, right? And it's not quite proportioned properly, but it would start off like this. So it would start off, so your ocean, your background would be covered. And if you notice, there's a problem here. I was able to get away with scrolling here because I have at least 3 lengths of screens. My background is 3 times the height of the screen, right? Here, this thing here, it's not 3 times the size. I need to make it longer, or I need to pick a background that's longer, and I can do that by extending it. Here, I'll extend it way over here. I'll stretch it so it looks proper. Okay, so this is what my background would look like, let's say. In fact, let's just squash it in for you. If you notice, my screen size hasn't changed because that doesn't make any sense. My screen size is going to be 640 by 480, just like this, right? Let's say if this is what we're doing. But now what you're doing is you're doing it the other way. So you're starting it here, and now you're scrolling this way, so it looks like it's right to left until you get to here, right? And then you're going to reset over here again. You're going to reset this background all the way to here, right? If you're going the other way, right? If your ship is over here and your background is coming this way, it'd be the same thing. You're going to go this way, this way, this way. It's almost like you're moving. It looks like you're moving. When you get to here, it's going to reset over here. That's all you're doing, right? Some people use multiple backgrounds. So they have something called a parallax scroll, right? Where you have a background in the back, right? And then you have some kind of other background in the foreground. Let me just copy this. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Control C. And it makes for a very interesting effect. All right, so let's just change the color background. Instead of this one, we'll make it so it's a little bit like a green. Okay, so this is a green. And as an example, let's say this is in the background, so we'll just move this down a little bit. Bear with me, you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. All right, so you have both backgrounds, and this one here is hard to see, but basically what you do is This one would scroll as well, but at a slower rate than this one. This one scrolls really fast. Oh, sorry, this one. This one scrolls really fast. It's gonna go, and this one scrolls a lot slower. So what happens is it looks like you have a 3D effect happening because the background is over here, like in the back, and the foreground is moving a little bit slower. It's better to see this with buildings. If you were gonna kind of have a spacecraft fly over buildings, the buildings in the background, you can have buildings really, really far away, like just like a kind of a cityscape, right? And in the foreground, you might have bigger buildings because they're closer to you. It's an illusion, right? And what happens is the buildings in the foreground look like they're moving really, really fast because your ship is right next to them. But the buildings way over in the background, from a perspective, are moving really slow. And that way, it makes it look like there's two scrolls going on. So it's called parallax scrolling, and you can do these things in a side scroller. For us for today, we're going to cover how to do this ocean coming down this way so you understand what I'm talking about. So let's do that. So we need an ocean background. We need an ocean background, right? That's kind of the first thing we need to do. So I'm just going to unclick this. I need to include this in my manifest. Now this is one of those that even if I was going to convert to sprites, I would not convert my ocean to a sprite. Tell me why. Why would I not convert my ocean to a sprite? Remember last week when we talked about sprites, or the week before, when we combine them into a sprite sheet, right? We don't want to make something really big, put it into a sprite sheet, because the biggest thing we put in the sprite sheet takes up a lot more memory. I'd rather load that up separate, right? And have my sprite sheet for all the little objects. Like for example, my button, my bullets, and my ship, and my enemies, and my explosions. And all that stuff should be on my sprite sheet that I'm going to put on my, that I'm going to include in my file, right? So here, I'm going to call this thing ocean, just rename this thing. And I'm going to go and, by the way, it's accessing. Let's take a look here. I got ping, ping, ping. And let's take a look at a Solution Explorer. I've got ping, ping, but I got my ocean's a GIF, right? So I'm going to say ocean.gif. And that's okay because you know what? I don't need to make my ocean a ping image. A PNG, or ping is how we like to call it, right? The thing with PNGs is they have a transparency channel, right? You have a red, green, blue, and an alpha channel. The alpha channel makes it transparent. GIFs don't have that necessarily, right? They're all RGB, and there's nothing else that it has. So it's a simpler graphic, and it's sometimes better to use a GIF image or JPEG for something that's static, like an ocean, right? You're not going to need to see through it, in other words, right? If you need to see through it, you need transparency, you're going to use a ping image, okay? I don't want to do this, the transparency stuff, as much as possible inside my programming, because that's going to take more cycles from my CPU. Anything that reduces my gameplay ability, I don't want to do programmatically. I want to do it graphically. I want to outside in a program. I want to do my graphics, and then I want to import them into my code. Okay, so I've got my my ocean. I got to enable it now. So I've got to create it here. I'm going to create it before everything else. So I'm going to say var ocean. And I'm going to make it a regular bitmap. So it's not going to be a special object. I'm going to just use my create.js library and make it a bitmap image. So I'm going to do that. And as I scroll down, I'm going to go and add it in. Now, okay, question, where should I add it? Should I add it here, after the cloud? Should I add it here, before the island, before the plane? Where should I put my ocean? Before that? Before the island. Very good. Because remember, we talked about display list. The display list is a big array, and it's in the order that you add things in, that's how it's going to be displayed. So let's just do that. So I'll say add ocean object to stage. All right, cool. So we're going to say ocean then, right, is equal to a new create.js, because we're using create.js bitmap, right? And we're going to pass into it assets.getResult, and then we're going to say ocean. That's what we're going to do, right? Okay, cool. I could do it just like that. So I have no special object. I'm just adding in an ocean. But then I got to put all that stuff. I got to put all the programming in to make the ocean move and all that stuff, right? So it doesn't make sense. So I really do need to make ocean some kind of special class, or else I'm going to include all the code in here if I just did this. So let's leave this as a kind of a placeholder because we're not going to use it like that. We can't leave it like that, even if we wanted to. I mean, I could put it in here, but that means I have to create an update for my ocean because my ocean has to move. I need an update, right? My ocean doesn't do anything. It doesn't collide with anything, so there's no collisions for my ocean, right? But my ocean physically has to move, right? Okay. So let's do that. Let's go over across to my files. I'm going to go to Solution Explorer, right? I'm going to pin this up here again. And if you notice, I've got inside my object, I've got cloud, island, and plane. Now, the one that's closest to my ocean idea is the island, right? Because the island moves down. It only moves 5 pixels per frame, right? Which is pretty cool. And you know what? I want my island and my ocean to go the same speed, because if my ocean moves faster than my island, it's going to look like my ocean is rushing. Like, my island is just something else. It's just some kind of boat. It's not going to look right. My island and my ocean have to move together because, so it looks like it's one. Like the island and the ocean are one piece, right? But they're not. They're different random pieces. The island appears randomly, but the ocean, it gives the illusion that the ocean and the island are one. Okay, so I need to make this happen. And I'm going to use my island as a blueprint. So let's open up the island. Here it is. I'm going to copy everything. So Control A, Control C to copy everything. I may not use it all, but I need to copy it. And then I'm going to create a new object, right? Add a new TypeScript file. There it is. And I'm going to call this thing ocean, right? Okay, cool. I'm going to Control V for paste. I'm going to just unpin this now that I don't need it. And I need to change the words, right? So it can't be island anymore. It's got to be ocean, right? And it's going to extend the create.js bitmap. I like that. Width and height and all that stuff I may not need. I'll leave it for now, right? I need a reset. I need this reset idea. I need to check bounds. I need to do this. So I need all these things, right? These are all things that I would need for my ocean, okay? It also is going to move at 5 pixels per frame. I like that, right? The only difference, I'm just going to rename some of these comments also, just to make sure that we've got all the comments renamed, because, one thing is it doesn't have to start at a random location. That's the first thing. So if you look over here where my island resets and starts at a random location, my ocean's not going to do that. In fact, my ocean, right, we have to understand how big my ocean is, all right, to understand what I'm going to do here. Okay, so let's go into, there's a couple things we need to get into. And one of them is my library. So let's see if I can go into my Mail Pilot. I'm going to go into my assets just to look at my ocean. Here's my images. And if I hover over it with my in Windows, right, I see that my ocean is 640, the size, the width of my screen, by 1440. 1440. Yeah, darn. What does that mean? Let's see, pull up a calculator here. So if I go 1440, right, divided by 480, right, I get 3. So it's 3 sizes, the size of 3 lengths or 3 heights of my screen. That's what it is, the ocean. And that means that I'm going to at least have one showing all the time, right? So if I want to start my ocean off, I'm going to start it so it's off screen, part of it. Let's go back over here to show you that. So I'm going to undo for a second. See if I can get this back to where it was. Ba, 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 ba. And it does not. Okay, that's okay, because we can resize this thing ourselves and reformat this thing. So I want to tell you what I'm talking about here. So this is the ocean, right? And my ocean should be here. And if it's 3 sizes, well, that's really big. If it's 3 sizes, approximately. Let's do it again. Up, up, up. Yeah, that's about right. Okay. So here's my ocean. I got to start it here, right? I can't start it like this. That means it needs to be reset right away. I need to start my ocean over here so that the bottom of my ocean meets the bottom of my viewport, right? So that means that I got to start this off a negative value outside of my screen. So the top, remember, because all objects start at the top left corner of the screen by default, right? So this top left corner is where my ocean is going to start, right? So that means it's got to start a negative, there's going to be a negative value that I got to put it off screen. That's my first piece. Right? So when it resets, it's got to reset to that negative value every time. And it's not going to reset randomly. right? It's just going to go off screen. Okay, that's the first thing I need to understand. So if that's the case, and if if my ocean is, like I said before, if I hover over it, 1440 pixels, and I need one screen minimum, right? So if I say 1440 pixels, do some calculation, minus 480, that means I have to start it off negative 960, right? It means that it's physically off the screen. The top of my ocean, this part here, is at negative 960. Let me just move this down so I can write that number down, right? So this is where my screen is. This is what I see. This is my canvas somewhere, big canvas. And this value right here, right at the top left corner of the screen, is at negative 960, right? And the reason why I have to have it there is because, let's make this thing a little bigger so we can see that 20 points, let's say. I have to put this at negative 960 up here from a y perspective, right? So y definitely has to equal to negative 960. Right? Because I'm leaving it off the screen and it's going to start flowing down until it hits, I'm just going to copy this and paste it. Right here, this would be y is equal to 0, right? So once y is equal to 0, right, this is where it's going to flow. It's going to flow from here. So this is the top of my ocean. It's going to start from 960. It's going to go to y is equal to 0 and then reset. Has to do that. Right? And by the way, when I say y is equal to 0, I mean that the top of this screen here. So if this is y, what's x? X is the horizontal offset. There is no horizontal offset, so it's always going to be like this. X, right, is also going to be equal to 0, right? And y is equal to minus, what I'm going to call it, 960. That's where I have to start it off. And then it's going to go to the point where x, right, is going to be equal to 0, and y is going to be equal to 0. That's the difference. So it's going to flow from here, from these coordinates to this coordinate. From here, this point, to here, this point. Once it does that, it resets. And that's going to be my boundary check. My check bound is going to say, well, when when the top of my screen equals the top of my stage, reset. Okay, because it's going to do this. It's going to go from here to here. When it does that, it's going to go back up here. Right? So these are the two fancy numbers, not minus 960, right? And 0. Okay, let's do that. Let's program that in. So, a couple things. We don't want to set my registration values to the middle of my point. I want to keep them on the top left corner. Remember what this does, this reset of reg x and reg y, is my focal point, right? I don't want to do that. If I reset it, that means I'm going to put my focal point, let me just draw this in for you. I'm going to put my focal point somewhere in here. I don't want that, right? I don't want my focal point being in the middle of my object, right here. That's what it would do, right? If I set reg x and reg y to the height, half the height and half the width of the screen, it's going to be here, right? I want it to be up here still. I want my registration values to start at the top left corner, right? And so I don't I don't change my registration values. So this has to come out of my ocean. Can't be there because it doesn't make any sense for this particular class. An understanding of height and width is okay. I may not need it, but let's leave it as is for now. This reset, when I say this reset, I'm actually calling the reset function. So I'm going to call it right at the beginning. That's fine. This doesn't have to change. So this x is always going to be 0, right? So I might as well just change this to 0 because that's never going to change, remember? I don't have a random x value, right? And this y is not going to be this height because this height is like crazy, 1440. It's going to be minus 960. So I'm just going to kind of put it in here as a value, 960. Right, 960. I'm getting this number because of this, right? 960. It's going to take 1440. I'm going to minus 480 so I can see it on my screen at all times. I'm going to put it up here, right? 960. That's why I'm getting that number, right? 960. So reset to off screen. Okay. Reset ocean off screen. Okay, so that's the first, that's what the reset does. Now, how do I know when to reset? Well, I'm going to check my bounds, and I'm going to say if, and that's not island, it's ocean. If my ocean, this dot y, right, is, this dot y is the actual value, is equal to 0, once it hits the top of my stage, then reset. That's all it needs to do. So it's a very simple reset. So if this y, right, I'm not going to compare it to the height, I'm going to say is equal to 0, right, then reset. Because as it comes down, it's from minus 960, it's going to go 5 pixels every frame until it comes down, until it meets 0, the top of my screen. And when that happens, I don't want to see white space. I don't want it to keep going, or else it's going to go flow off my screen. I want it to reset. Okay, so I'm going to check bounds first. So this is where I'm going to do it. I'm going to say, in my update function, right, I'm going to say island ocean. I'm going to move my on update, this dot y is plus equal to this dot dy, and dy is the change in y, which I've assigned 5 pixels per frame, right? So every update, every frame, every time I update my screen, I'm moving my ocean down 5 pixels, the same speed as my island, right? And then I'm going to check bounds every frame and say, is it, hey, did I reach 0? Did I reach 0? Did I reach 0? I'm going to keep asking that question every frame. And when I say yes, reset. That's what's happening. Okay, so I've got my ocean class, right? I haven't tested it yet. I need to test it out, make sure that I haven't done anything wrong, right? Or I forgot something. Let's pin this back on here. So here's my, I've got my ocean. How do I connect it to my game? I need to connect it somehow. How do I connect it to my game? I got my ocean class. I need to connect it to my game. What do I do? I need to, that's the first step. My first step when I include it, I have to include it here in my index. I want to include it kind of in order as much as possible. I don't have to. Probably a good idea. I don't have to, as long as my game.js knows about it somehow before my game.js is executed. I want to basically make sure that it's there. But it's a good idea to try and keep it in organized order. So I want to kind of put it here for now. So here's my ocean.js, plain.js, island.js. Okay, I've got one more step to do. I need to make a reference to it up here in my game.ts file. I've got to do that so that way my game file can use IntelliSense, right? So I'm going to kind of drag and drop my ocean in here. So here's a reference to my ocean. I'm just going to separate them so you see. These references up here are the library references. These references down here are my custom game objects that I made, right? Okay, cool. Now I need to change my ocean. It can't be a create.js bitmap anymore. It needs to be an objects ocean. So objects ocean, right? That's the first thing. All right, now that I got that, I'm going to go down here. I'm not going to change this piece, ocean. I'm just going to change this one. Object. This is going to say objects ocean. So objects ocean. Okay, that's the only thing that really changes there. And I really got to add this to the stage. So stage.addChild and then ocean, like we normally do. Because if I don't add it to my stage, it doesn't get added. I also have to update it every frame. So I need to put an update, an ocean update in my game loop. This is where all the action happens. So I'm going to say ocean.update. So I'm updating every frame. This game loop refreshes my screen, redraws everything, and I'm going to access my ocean, update my plane, update my island, update my clouds, right? And then I do my stage update. So every frame I'm redrawing all those objects over and over again. Okay? Okay, let's run this thing. First of all, let's save everything. And let's run this thing to see what it does now. Oh, hey, what happened to my ocean? Oh, wait a minute, I got to refresh. There it is. So you see how my ocean looks like it's the same speed as my island now, right? My ocean's moving at the same speed. So it looks like my island and my ocean are one. It's not true. It's an illusion. My island randomly appears wherever it's going to be for that particular time it gets reset. Now there's a bit of jiggliness. Do you see the jiggliness? Watch. Watch carefully. See that little jiggle? That could be my ocean resetting. And the other thing is, if you notice, it looks like my ocean's all one, right? Like one object. It doesn't seem there's a break, like a space between my ocean. So for you to find a background that repeats, right, that's tiled, look at this. See these two dots? This is how you can tell it's repeating. See these two dots right here? Really quickly, one more time. These two dots, right? One more time. Ready? These two dots. You know what that means? It's repeating. The ocean keeps repeating. It's the same ocean, just resetting all the time, right? So how do I find an object or a texture that you can use, right, for your game? Because your game's not going to be an ocean. Your game's going to be your game, right? How do I find that? Well, again, I directed you to this before, but there's a bunch of things you can do. If I go to CG textures, right, you can definitely find textures that you can use, right? For example, if I want to look at and see things like water, right? Let's say I was going to find a water. Here's some water, right? Really, realistic looking water. There's problems with this kind of realism, by the way. I'll show you what I'm talking about. So here is a set that's tiled, right? So if I want to find water that moves right to left, right, as an example, I could, by going to CG textures, find something. And if you notice, if it says tiled, right, that means it's made so that it can repeat, and you're not going to notice the join in the middle, right? And that's what you want to find. You want to find a way of finding an ocean that kind of joins. Now this one is no good. See how it says set huge, but it doesn't say set tiled? The reason why is because it's different on this side than it is from this side. If I was to use this one, when you repeat this, it's going to look like there's a line that goes between the two oceans. It won't look like it goes on forever. It'll look like, hey, I just moved from one line to the other. I just repeated it, right? Which is a negative, right? That's not what you want to do. Sometimes to avoid this, what people do is they use multiple, like I said, multiple objects that they scroll on top of each other with transparency, which you can do. And so that way it looks like it's always flowing, right? As opposed to the way it looks typically. Okay, so you want something that's tiled, right? You can also search Google for a like some kind of scrolled background or continuous background, repeating background, as an example, right? And if I go to images, there's different kinds of repeating backgrounds. This would be one. Why would this be one? Even though this is kind of weird, right? I don't know if I'd ever use this in a game, right? But the idea is the same. See how the top of this, right, meets the bottom of this? It would kind of almost look like it's scrolling, right? Because as you connect this side to this side, it keeps moving. That's the idea. There's no break. This is also interesting because there's a bit of stars on this side, but there's no stars in the middle, so you can't see that there's a background. Same thing with this one, because it continues from this side to this side, so it kind of scrolls over. You've got to find something in your background so it doesn't look like there's a break. Once you see the break, like see how there's a bit of transition here, but the same transition over here, that's okay. Once you see the break, right, then you know something's wrong, right? So you want something like a continuous scrolling background. Let's see that. So repeating background, or like almost like a scrolling background, right? Here's one. Take a look at this one. So you start over here, right? And you move over this way, and then you come over here, and it repeats because the top of this building and the top over here, the sun comes out. So if I was going to use something like this, the city would keep scrolling over and over again. It would just keep running, almost like your ship is going, or your plane. Here's another one. See how this part over here meets this part over here? Then the image scrolls right to left. Same thing with this one. Here's a tree, and it meets up with this tree and stuff, and you don't see that there's a transition. Same thing with this one. See how there's a bit of a launch there? So it goes like this and comes over here. Same thing with this one. Same thing with this one. That's a very simple one. So that's an ugly one. But you could, and so on, right? I'm going to keep going. Here's look at the trees, right? A little bit of a tree there. I'm not sure if this would work. This one would definitely work. You can see already this one would work because you get a bit of that one over there. And as you can see, there's many different ones that you can probably use to simulate a right to left scroll. Okay? I do not recommend something that it doesn't look right. Right? If it jumps from one side to the other, right, it's negative. And you could create it on your own too. The challenge with creating a continuous scrolling background on your own, right, is you have to make sure that the seams, so the end of the one side and the other side, it looks the same. It connects. If you were going to take the right side and connect, or the right side and connect it to the left side, there's no break. It wouldn't look like there's a break. There's a change. Otherwise, what you'll get is a line, a seam, especially from a color perspective. Careful with colors. You'll see a line that goes all the way down your screen, and you don't want that. Otherwise, it'll break up your screen too much. Okay, so we've got our scrolling background. I've given you kind of an idea of how it works, right? So if I was to refresh this to see where we're at right now, this is all good. So it runs, you know, again, we move our plane right to left. We can go underneath the clouds here, right, underneath the clouds. But we're above the islands as we flow over the islands. I need a way I need to detect my collisions. And this is where we get into a little bit more complicated stuff, okay? How do I do the collision detection? So let's go back to the drawing board for a second. This is important to understand this, right? And you know what? I'm going to use maybe some live images here so you understand what I'm talking about, right? Now, I've got my images here, right? And what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy these images. Actually, just, yeah, okay, it's fine. I'll copy these images, or maybe, yeah, okay. Let's just do this. And I'll put this into my course. So I got to pass it across so I can see. I can show you what I'm talking about here, because otherwise it's going to be more challenging to see. So I'm going to go into my date today, right? So let me see if I got them in here already. I got an atlas. You know what? I got my islands and I got my plane. Okay, you know what? I got them already. All right, good. So let's go back in there and let me show you what I'm talking about. So let's leave this up, right? This is my own thing. I can go back to it later on. But what I want to do today is I want to get into this images, and I want to kind of, you know, double click on my cloud. Let's see if I can get my cloud going. Oh, it's a different cloud. That's not the cloud. That's not the cloud I was looking for. Let's go and grab my different enemies, different explosions. Let's see my plane's messed up. There's different planes. So there's different kind of planes. This is a little bit of an animation that I could use for my planes. And you can see how they're a little bit different. We're going to talk about animation a little bit today too. But what I really want is, and I got a couple of islands and so on. See if I got some assets over here. And I've got some other assets in here. My sprite sheet. You know what? That's okay. I'll use my island in my plane. So I've got an island. Here's a random island. This is the island that you normally would be used to seeing, right? And I'm going to make a new canvas, right? That's 640 by 480, right? And I'm going to take my island, and I'm going to copy it. I'm going to put it on my canvas so you can see that it's there now. So here's my island, right? What do you see immediately around the island? Can you tell me what you see? It's a square, right? So there's a square right here. Okay, so there's my square for my island. Okay, I want to make a collision between my plane and my island. Let's get the plane image. See if I can find one that's normal. And this is probably not the normal one. But that's okay, I'll just pick one. All right, so I'll pick, I'll go in here and I will surround this one here. And I want you to tell me what the problem is, right? There we go. There's my plane. I'm going to grab this funky plane. There's different kinds of planes you can grab. And I'm going to paste it. Don't resample. That's pretty big. Okay, let's make it a little bit smaller. So I want you to tell me what you think the problem is going to be. So here's my plane. And here's my island. Right? Is there a collision? Are they connecting? Are they touching? Okay. How about now? Is there a collision? The answer is yes. Yes. See this? This is the square of my island. This is the square of my plane. When I see my plane like this, physically in my eye, for the player, there's no collision, right? Because my plane, obviously, there's no collision. So I want it to be this. I want it to be to do this, right? But my problem is I've already collided way before this, right? So there's a couple of tricks people use. There's one that they do this. They say, well, okay, fine, these are my boundaries, but instead of using boundaries like this, I can make it so that there's another phantom object like a circle, right? So I can make it so that there's a circle, right? Watch. So let's make it so that the boundaries are the same approximately, and I'm going to just resize my circle, right? So just to meet the size of my object, let's say approximately. There's my circle. That doesn't kind of capture that part, but just bear with me here. And let's just get rid of the circle and make it kind of, actually I just make it less transparent. So I'll make it instead of 100, I'll go to 50% or 30%. There we go. So there's my circle, right? And that's where it's invisible, right? Now, is my island and my circle in collision? It is, right? You see how this is a problem? Even if I use a circle, it looks to me that there's no collision from the game. But the game is telling me there is, because my circle and my square are colliding. So that doesn't work, right? I could put another circle on top of the plane. That's exactly it. So I could take this circle here, right, copy it, and put it on top of the plane. There's a lot of work here, all right, just to let you know. But remember, my plane is here, not the shadow, right? So now I'll move the planes, my ellipse, and let's say here's my bitmap. I will move this down a little bit. There we go. There's my ellipse, my bitmap, and then maybe my bitmap and my ellipse. Okay, and let's move these to, and these layers a little bit higher. There we go. They're up high. And you know what? Just to make sure that what they are, I will group them, right? Just so I can show them. And this one here, I will group these two. So that way there's two. By the way, you can use any program, like I said. I'm just using Fireworks. It's easy. Okay, so now, is there a collision? No. How about now? Is there a collision? How about now? Is there collision? I got a problem, right? It doesn't look real. It doesn't look. There's a big space here. You might say there's no space, but if I back up, right, is there a collision? Right? You can tell there's no collision. There's no collision there. So what's the better way? Now it's happening fast. So even if I was to do this way, circle upon circle, and by the way, circle and circle collision, more difficult than square on square collisions, by far, right? Because it's calculations. We're making mathematics now, right? So I need to do something that makes sense. I can't put this collision circle together. The squares won't work for me. So what's the other solution? Well, a lot of people do is they sit there, they do two things. One, they have to say, well, how fast is my stuff moving? Is it fast enough that my player can he tell that there's a collision? That's one question. And the other question is, can I do pixel perfect collisions? Is that a nice thing to do, right? Should I do pixel perfect collisions for a game like this? And the answer is probably no. I'll tell you why. There's too many calculations to figure out which pixel on this particular thing right now, especially if it's animated. Imagine if there's an animation going on. If I got a pixel here on the red side, touches this pixel over here, it's too much work. And it literally have to compare every pixel. So if this pixel and this pixel are connecting, and it belongs to this one, belongs to the plane, and this one belongs to the island, pixel perfect collision, I don't recommend it at all for 2D games. It's not a good plan. You need to create a collider, some kind of way of detecting this, right? And the circles, guys and girls, not going to work, right? Circles have another good way of working. Let me just undo them for a second. But we need to talk about this because before I do my collision and all that stuff, I got to talk about how this works. Okay, so here's my plane, here's my island. They are physically not colliding, but however they're the squares are intersecting. I'm going to ignore this. I don't care about if they're intersecting. What I want to care about is the distance between my two objects. This is another calculation. But I want to do this. Here's my object number one. If it's coming from here, I'm just going to move this down a little bit and make it a little bit smaller so you can see. All right. So forget this shadow part, okay? And this, by the way, the shadow part is an issue. I want you to think about it because the shadow part here is part of the bitmap. And if I calculate the size of my object, including the shadow, and the shadow sticks out this much, right, I got a problem. What's my problem? My problem is that this becomes a calculation point. The shadow adds on. Now, it looks nice. If I go over the island, it looks like there's a shadow that goes over the island. Look. Looks nice, right? But I got to make sure that only the plane is calculated. So it means a little bit of work on my side. So how do I do that? How do I measure? If it was this plane, not my other plane, how do I calculate how big this plane is, number one? And there's a reason for why I need it, too. Well, first of all, I got to draw another object on top of it just to see how big it is. I can measure it in different ways, but this is the way I would like to do it. Right? So I'm going to kind of grab another rectangle and draw approximately a rectangle around this one. It's going to probably be black. Yeah, it is. All right, there we go. And that's probably the size. So it looks to me like it's about 59 wide by about 53 high, right? That's my size. Okay, cool. So that's my rectangle. I'm still going to use rectangles, right? But what I want to do is I want to take half of this. So my height is 53. I want to go to a height of about 26. Bear with me here when I do this. Here's my 26. All right, so half the height of my object. Okay. Let's do the same thing for the island. Now the island is square, which is good, right? And there's nothing sticking out of it, which is okay too. So this works okay for this thing. And by the way, this is a trick again, right? So I'm going to take the island, I'm going to circle it, I'm going to kind of surround it with this, other thing. There's another square here. It's probably a little bit out. There we go. Let's make it so it's touching. There we go. Okay. And I want right now the island is roughly, the height is 60. This for the square, I want to make it so it's 30. Okay, now I'll move this thing down. There we go. Okay. So I've got half the height of the island, right? And half the height of my plane, right? My plane's height is not including the shadow, right? So what I'm doing is I'm saying this. When these two objects are touching, bear with me. So when my plane is like this, my island's coming this way, and once these two objects touch, right, approximately half the height of my island and half the height of my plane, I'm going to say it's close enough. Reason why is because if I zoom out, you might say that this is almost there, and it's going to move so quickly that by the time this island goes to the plane, it's pretty good. Where I get into issues, and I'm going to say this like this, just to see where it is. It's the distance between the middle of the objects, by the way, right, is where my plane is like this, right? What's the distance between this and this? Well, we know the distance is about 30. And what's the distance between this and this? Well, my distance is about 26, right? So I'm going to move my plane up so you see what I'm talking about. Here's my 20, and then I'm going to measure to the middle of my plane. From here to the middle to here to this middle, right? So I'm going to take my line just to show you my thinking, right? I'm going to make a line between the two objects. There we go. And the line, I'm going to make it solid red, right? But make it like this on 5 pixels wide so you can see it. Okay, there's the line. All right, so there's the distance between these two objects. The distance from my line, if I click on my line now, right, is my width, right, is 52, and my height is 52, and my width is 64. I'll tell you right now, it's longer than the width of my plane, or the height of my plane, which is 26, and the height, which is 30, is 52, right? It's bigger than that, which means as long as this line is longer than the height of my two objects, we're going to say there's no collision. That's a quick and dirty way. Now this works great from up and down collision, all right? If my objects, you're going to make a game that goes the other way around. You're going to make a game that goes like this. So your plane, if you're going to make a plane game or something like that, and we're going to combine these things. I know I'm going into a lot of explanation, but you need to understand this, or else when I do my collision work, you're going to go, what happened, right? Your plane is going to go this way, right? If you're going to make a plane game, right? And your island, let's say if it was going this way, I'm going to just rotate the whole thing, make it easy. Right? I don't have to, obviously it wouldn't be rotated, but if you're going to make this game, your game would go this way. So the island would come this way, right? So you wouldn't do half the height, you would do half the width. That's the difference. If you're going to make some kind of distance formula, you want to check to see that the distance between the two objects, the center of each object, is half the width. I'm going to check the center of each object is half the height because mine is up and down, right? That's a good enough collision. Once I go to pixel perfect collisions, like I said, it's too many cycles. It's going to slow my game right down. There's another problem, right? I'm just going to undo for a second. Okay, there's another problem. I need to check these collisions every frame. So I got to check the size of this line, the line that runs between my two objects, every frame. Is there a possibility that I can collide here? How about here? How about here? How about here? How about here? So there's a possibility, but I can't possibly collide up here. Some people may say they'll make a zone, right? Which is it's a tactic, right? I'm just going to show you where there's a big zone that goes like this. So if an object is within this zone, right, then start your collision check. Okay, there's a problem with that, right? So I'm going to say, okay, is it collision? Okay, oh, now I'm going to start checking my collisions. Okay, this is great, and you don't want to slow down your game. But the problem is, imagine I only have 2 little objects here that I'm checking. What if there are 10 objects, 20 objects that I'm checking all at the same time? Bullets, you've got your plane going on, your clouds, a lot of stuff going on at the same time. What's going to happen is this. It's going to run fast here, really, really fast up here. And as soon as it gets down to this checking area, it's going to go beep, 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 beep. It's going to start checking a lot more, right? So you're going to have an inconsistent speed, really, really fast, and then slow down. It's going to look crap. So better make it all slow is the way. No, I'm serious. I'm telling you right now. Better to be a consistent speed, same frame rate, and do all your checks all the time, then make this an inconsistent speed. If you made a zone somehow. By the way, it doesn't have to be a round zone. It could also be some kind of bigger zone like this. For example, if I made a big square, like this, you can make it so it's a zone like this. So if anyone comes into my zone, I'll make this down to 30%. If anyone comes within inside this zone at all, you can make you start checking. Okay, you can do that. And again, it really depends on what you have in your zone. Maybe this is your home zone, something that you're checking or whatever. If you're checking for collisions, you're still going to have these little squares. You're still going to have this, you're checking for distances between this and this, right? But you're doing it less often. You're only doing it when you get in here. Again, I don't recommend. I know some people will try that stuff where they check the distance. Obviously, this is a distance that's very long. And we're going to see that when we do the distance checking formula, we want to check between here and here every frame. That's what we're going to be doing over here. Let's try that. Whew, big explanation. And you know what? It's 9:34. I think it's a good chance for us to take a small break. So I know some people are dying, right? Falling asleep, right? I know they're laughing. But let's take a small break, 5 or 10 minutes, and reset a little bit. Take a deep breath and come back. We'll do the next piece because it's going to get heavy.